All right. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Matt Pfeiffer, and this is Supplier U. We are here this morning with our friend Mike Price from Retail Execution Management. Mike comes from the far eastern part of the United States. In fact, so far that you got to cross a pond to get there. He'll tell you a little bit more about that. But Mike is going to be talking with us today about getting things done in store. We're so grateful to have him. Again, Supplier U is the first of its kind membership-based supplier education platform that gives teams unlimited access to live classes as well as video on demand afterwards. And then most importantly, direct access to the presenter. So if you've got questions as we go, you can submit those via the Q&A button, but you will also be able to contact Mike afterwards to talk about questions you might have or help that he might be able to give to your team. So Mike, if you would kick it off with an introduction of yourself. Thank you so much for being here. Look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks, Matt. It's a pleasure if you can just move on a slide for me. So as Matt said, my name is Mike Price. I'm from the other side of the pond to most of you. I'm a Brit, although I'm reasonably or very well traveled actually. I had a long career in CPGs. I worked for the Pepsi bottler in the UK. I then did 10 years at Gillette, and I've just finished 15 years at Unilever at the end of 2020 before going out on my own and focusing just around retail execution management and all the elements to it. I've done the lot. I've led teams in the UK. So locally, I've worked in the European region, and I spent the last 5 years working globally, which took me to over 30 markets. So I've come with the T-shirt and the badge. I'm very passionate about what I do, and I believe in a collaborative approach to building an ecosystem of people to do it. And as you can see from the photo, spending a lot of time on the retail floor, working with people actually doing the job. So it's not about a high-level process in my former life, in the global strategy, or in my current life now, working with partners and CPGs. It's very much about being on the floor. So if we can go on, Matt, please. So what's this session all about? So today, really, the purpose, as was in the title, is to look at the type of work that supplier teams should be doing in stores on a regular basis. And I would urge you to think about that, both in terms of the what you do and the how you do it. And today we're going to focus a little bit more on the what rather than the how. However, the outcome that my gift to you today is a framework that will effectively allow you to think about how to deliver best-in-class competitive execution and start to think about, to identify where and how to have the maximum impact at store level. The structure is, it's not death by PowerPoint. I've got 6-7 slides to walk you through and then to take Q&A at the end. And I know the session was on the calendar for up to an hour, so it'll be 45 minutes to an hour, depending on perhaps the number of questions that people have. So that's really what it's about. So if we can move on, Matt, please. So where does this all start? What's the key message to take away? Well, one of the things that I've lived and breathed through my 20 plus years in execution is this concept around point of purchase grip. So what is point of purchase grip? And more importantly, the fact that it hasn't changed with COVID-19 and the technology advancements that we've seen in the past few years. So for me, this all starts in the top right-hand corner around the store or point of purchase or POP, whatever language you want to use, store segmentation as to where do we visit, because that ultimately drives everything else in this whole concept around point of purchase grip and then the framework of how to deliver it. Because ultimately, having decided where to go and why to go will then determine the visit frequency. How often do we visit different banners or formats or channels? So that's the first consideration. The second thing to then consider is how long are we actually there? So not only where we go, how often we go, but how long we will be in store. And that will vary, potential down to, opportunity and things that can or can't be done. And that in turn is driven and leads into the roles that are deployed. Where do you send different types of people to different types of stores for different times at different frequencies? Because ultimately, as was in the name of the session, it's all around the actions that are completed. And these 5 elements together ultimately will drive the point of purchase grip that you have on a supplier, on the particular stores that you have in your channel. So that's the first key message. Think about this whole point of purchase grip concept. But how do we deliver it? If you can scroll on that, please. So how do you deliver this? Well, getting things done in store for me, and this is the same across anywhere in modern trade across the world, it starts with a framework that supports both the what to do and the how to do it effectively. And from many of my travels, what I saw was, and questions that I asked and worked with people was, people didn't particularly have a clear approach to what it is they should be doing and how to do it. So this is a very, very simplified, top-level model of how to think about retail execution. So it starts at the top. We're going to go clockwise around just to give you a bit of the headlines. It really starts with a head office defining what it is, the purpose of the retail execution field forces. So that whole purpose, the vision, the strategy, why do we exist? Why do we put dollars and pay people to go out into the field? Second one is around, as I started to touch on with the point of purchase grip, the whole POP coverage, the store segmentation model. Where do we go and why should we go? So once we've got our vision and purpose, it's then about where do we go? That then flows into the organizational design. So what type of roles, what type of structures? Do we want an internal team? Do we have a partner team? Do we have crowd resources, syndicated, a mix of people? How do we organize? How are we organized to deliver and visit those stores? And then once people have gone through that exercise, it's around the whole people capability and reward mechanism. So there's a whole piece about people, because people are still very important despite some of the tech advancements, which then lead into the how do I operate? There's the Salesforce automation solutions, some of the tooling, whether it's image recognition, whether it's POS data, and whether it's augmented reality, whatever. Within the SFA solution, there'll be a number of tools. And that's all delivered and underpinned by the sales cycle process. So when you get to store, there's a lot happened that has been cascaded down before you get there. That's in the sales cycle process. Then we turn up and we're now going to do our visits. And that's all about the in-call process. That's about an effective steps of the call. How do we operate? Which in turn drives out a series of metrics. What are the KPIs? What's the return on every dollar we invested? How do we report stuff? How do we continually improve? And then the final module in this framework for the businesses is around how do we work with partner teams? And that's something that you won't find in any McKinsey, Bain, BCG, EY, any of the other big consultancies. You won't find a module on selecting with a broker and building collaborative partnerships, because the only difference should be who pays the check into your bank. It should be a seamless, no difference. So what's behind this, and this is the top line today, what goes behind this, I guess, model is a series of templates to support identifying what best in class looks like, some operating defined principles. And we're not going to get into any of that today. That's the whole sort of consulting framework behind it. However, you can see that there's 4 boxes which are blued out. So we're going to really focus in the next few slides and think about looking at the purpose, vision, and strategy. We're going to think about store segmentation, POP coverage. We're going to have a look at the whole in-call process. And then we're going to have a look at KPIs and reporting. And the reason I'm going to focus on those 4 today is they're more the what to do. Some of the others, structures, people capability, SFA solutions, processes is the how to do it effectively. So we're going to focus, as it says today, on the what. But I just wanted to give you, and if you take nothing else away and you were to dial off at this point, please take this slide with you, because this is my gift to you of how to do it. And you need to ultimately get all these modules in place and aligned and working. It's not a case of get one or two and forget about everything else. If you want to win, beat the competition, be the best, then it all has to ultimately flow. But if we move on, Matt, we'll get into the detail and have a look about the purpose. So for me and the teams that I've worked with over many years, and having started carrying the bag myself for Pladis, or when it was McVitie's, the biscuit supplier in the UK, there are 4 reasons for me why I might visit a store. And if the purpose of your role, my role, doing that, and the visits are not clear, you have a problem. And the reason that I flag that is because in my visits and travels around the world, working with different people, when I've asked them, what is it you're here to do? A lot of people actually struggle to clearly articulate what they were there to do. It might sound odd. It might seem, surely they know surely they must know what they're doing. But actually, it's not always clearly defined. So for me, there was 4, we'll move left to right and just talk about 4 reasons why I might be deployed to store. And yes, as I've said in the banner, it could be that a store visit is focused on more than one of the strategic objectives in each visit. But I guess the high level overview, the sort of macro, is the category overview. And this is around really giving the business that broader perspective of what's happening at a category level, the whole fixture, all the modules, often to provide, say, a competitor insight, a competitor lens, or it could be about landing a range review and a category reset. So it could be that I'm deployed into store and what I'm being asked to do sits under a category overview. Now, it could be that they're the second part of this, and there is a link between, there's a sort of like a baton handoff, is around perfect store. There's most CPGs now have some form of perfect excellence or perfect store program. And this is all around implementing or measuring perfect store agreements. So these are normally either the defined head office look of success. So how are we performing against what we've defined we'd like to look like? Or it could be around how we land and deliver specific perfect store, agreements that are done with our retail partners. But whatever those, whether it's an ideal or defined look of success or an actual agreement, ultimately, there'll be different KPIs that really should be measured at different frequencies. And the learning that I've seen people make and the observation to move away from is measuring everything on every visit. That's not the best use of time, even with the use of image recognition technology to save you time and improve accuracy. If you've got that in your SFA toolkit, it still isn't necessarily necessary to measure every KPI on every visit. It could be, the third reason that you're visiting a store is around a trade terms agreement. So it could be to either set up something that's been agreed with the retailer. This could be to cut in new product introductions. It could be to set up or look at specific promotions or shelf layout, something that ultimately the retailer will receive a payment or discount on for doing something that's been a part of a joint business plan between the retailer and the supplier. And here, this is about either actioning particular elements of a trade terms agreement or potentially measuring that implementation against that agreement so that payments can either be made or potentially withheld in the case of the agreement isn't implemented, or there's some negotiation to offset something for the implementation that hasn't happened at the time. And the fourth reason why I might be or you might be going into store is what I've just called around sales opportunities. And this is where there's a large or high degree of store level decision making on the range, the assortment, the space that's given, the share of shelf, and potentially locally promotions could be agreed or implemented, or other secondary expositions or displays. So it's very much in this retailer, in this banner, or in this store, I can influence everything. So I potentially am going to go for either a category perspective, a perfect store perspective, a trade terms perspective, or local sales opportunities. And if you think about that and those four pillars, why am I here? And if you ask somebody and it's not in one of those four, then I would suggest that they've got a problem and perhaps why you're there. And it's that last opportunity, that sales opportunity, that leads us nicely into to think about the next slide and store segmentation. Because what we've got now is the degree of influence at store should ultimately drive which roles are deployed and what tasks can be completed. So let me just explain this. It's actually it's actually very simple. Normally, when I've in my travels and asked people, how do you segment your store? What's your store segmentation model? Often, the value or size is the key determinant. People will say, yeah, we've got an ABC classification, we've got a gold, silver, bronze classification, a 1, 2, 3 classification. And behind that is normally a dollar value. So it's normally the bigger the stores, we go more often, we visit more often, we put more resources into those bigger stores. But I would urge you to think, is that actually the right way to think about it? So in this simple matrix, you've got 4 quadrants. You've got above the line is all really about the degree of influence. So it's the same KPIs. Can I influence assortment? Can I influence new products? Can I influence the planograms of share a shelf, the promotions or secondary displays? The KPIs are the same above and below the line. However, it's about that ability to actually influence those at a store level that is the key determining difference, because below the line is where retailers and banners and stores are more head office or centrally managed. We're not allowed, when we go through the door, to touch stuff. We can't go to the back office and get on the computer system. We're not allowed to get hold of a Telzon gun. We can't touch the fixture. We can't sell in local promotions. We can't go to the back of store perhaps and get a promotion and bring it out and set it up. It's all done centrally. Where in above the line, this is far more locally influenced. So then if you think right to left, it's about the sale. So size is still important, but it's not the sole criteria for where we visit and how often we go and who we deploy. Because here, if you take the top right, we've got a high value, big store. So it's basically big stores. So super centers, large stores, top right corner. On the left, you'd have small stores, convenience, proximity stores, but it's more all locally agreed. And on the bottom right, obviously, again, big stores, high turnover, high value. However, we can't do anything because it's all centrally agreed. And on the bottom left, it's small stores with no influence. So that broadly should then drive out, going back to our pointed purchase group model or thought, what type of resources should we be deploying to different quadrants? Because in the top right, big stores with a lot of influence, yeah, we really want people that are going there to sell, who can sell and influence, and possibly also have merchandising or other support to help them implement stuff. But these are the big stores where we can get a lot done. On the top left, yeah, we can still influence all the same KPIs, but they're smaller stores. The category size, the number of SKUs, the turnover is smaller. So here, the direction of travel would probably be more to some form of syndicated or shared service, but still more in a sales role. In the big stores where we can't do anything in the bottom right, it's more likely to be more of a merchandising support type measurement auditing operation, because we can report back, we might be able to pack product out, but we can't actually change anything. And on the bottom left, where the KPIs are driven by the head office, and these are small stores, I would actually say, do you know what? There's another way to engage with these retailers. We shouldn't be sending physical resource through the stores. So when people get into a mapping exercise, and something we did around the world with my former employer on the program, when you looked at this, when we went down this route of this quadrant approach, and we looked at where were we deploying resources, in most cases, in most markets, what you saw was there was too much resource in quadrant bottom left, quadrant 4, visiting stores where actually you can't really do anything, and they're actually quite small. And actually, you tended to see that not all the high value, big stores of high influence necessarily were being covered, or were being, the opportunity was being maximized. So you tended to see a reallocation of resources away from the bottom left. No visits, let's pull out of all this tail of stores and make sure that we're visiting all the top right stores, the big stores where we can influence, possibly to rebalance some sales resource and change some roles around from the bottom right, moving out, make sure our sales resource was in the top, and possibly rebalancing that with some merchandising or more merchandising support in the bottom right. And then to explore, can we work with non-compete suppliers and look at some syndicated operations in the top left. So this whole pop coverage of what I can do in store is very much driven by this pop coverage model, because if you're sending highly skilled, highly valuable people into those bottom segments, particularly in the bottom left where they're very small stores, then that really is a miss, and you're not going to be able to actually get much done. So that's the lesson around pop coverage. If we can move on, Matt, please. And that leads us into then, we're going to say, jump to the third out of 4 around pop visits. So don't get hung up on any of the numbers on the chart. This is really just to, illustrate the concept that everybody will have, or should have, I say should have, a steps of a call, which should clearly walk through something like the legend at the bottom. So there's some form of pre-call planning. Then there'll be, when you're actually at the store, some form of introduction and greeting step. There'll be some form of then sort of store assessment or identify opportunities, and you'll have your own language and nomenclature to define this. Then you'll get into some form of sales presentation, if you like, the selling step of the call. Then you go into action against the 6 Ps, the KPIs that we talked about. There'll probably be some form of reporting back, capturing what's been done, and then some form of post-call analysis. And all I'm trying to show here, with which was just an example of perhaps a more senior sales rep, perhaps calling, which would be focused on the high value, big stores in the previous slide. If you look there at the balance, and this was taken for some work for before and after some changes, what you want to see there is the focus of the time spent in the sales presentation. You don't want your high value sales people spending their time rolling their sleeves up, doing the lower value tasks, auditing stuff, or perhaps spending too much time in action. Whereas on the right side, the more junior sort of execution type rep, what you will see there in this example, and the colors haven't quite come over too well, but it's more the balance of, I think what's the yellow on your screen, is to there see that their time is actually spent in action with their sleeves rolled up, actually building displays, cutting products in, merchandising, whatever it is. So it's really in the message around the whole store visits and steps of the call is you want to make sure that the steps are focused and aligned to the role and the task, because if you've got the wrong people doing the wrong things, again, you're not going to maximize your point of purchase grip, and you're not going to get the best ROI coming out of it. And if we move on to the final one we're going to look at today, which is all around metrics. So this is an interesting subject. It's always creates a lot of discussion, but I think the message here is twofold. Firstly, that a metric should be timely and aligned to your defined objectives. And often you see a disconnection, or I've seen a disconnection between what people are measuring, normally too much, too often, And often it's not necessarily what they're measuring or being asked to measure, or the metrics around them aren't against their defined objectives. So it's like, there's a complete disconnection here between what my role is and what I'm being tasked to do and how I'm being measured or what I'm being asked to measure. And we're not going to get into the full detail of it, obviously, today with the time we got, and it will always be different. However, what you do have, or the way of thinking about it, is the 6 Ps. So if you go through the marketing 6 Ps of product, pack, place, pricing, promotion, and proposition, there are obviously different elements under each of those. And depending on what the role is, the frequency, going back to the point of purchase group model, should drive out an understanding and the right metrics for your role in whatever it is you do. But it's about understanding. The 2 messages are timely, probably less measurement and more measurement is the direction of travel. One example I saw in India, so a long way from where the majority of you probably are today. Modern trade, large stores, first couple of hours, measuring virtually all those Ps, all those different variables, and it took 2 to 3 hours to do. How? So the question on the observation is, having gone through this, how often do you do this? And the answer, I had to bear the double take, every day. So like, you're telling me you come into this store, this is your day, and you measure all these Ps every day, and it takes 2 to 3 hours. Yes. Okay. Go back into head office with all this information. What do you do with this, guys? To the national account team, the head office said, what do you do with all this? Well, we didn't know we measured it every day, and actually we don't do very much with it. So I'm going to say no more on that, but it's just around measurement should be timely and around the defined objectives. And it's then about getting out and making sure that the business understands what needs to happen. And that, Matt, is I think the closure of the theory part around getting things done in store.
Great stuff, Mike. And if anyone has questions, please go ahead and use that Q&A button and submit those now. But just a couple of questions that I had. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you're seeing folks make as they're trying to get things done? You've taken us through this great framework, but what are some of the most common mistakes that you're seeing?
I think it was, firstly, what's my role? I know it might sound, but I always ask people, why are we here? Why are you here? What is it that you actually are here to do? And often people weren't particularly clear in why they were there. And I get things, but I'm here to. Well, I've got some stuff to. I've got to audit this. Sometimes it's out. I'm here to implement Perfect Store. So in fairness, as that became certainly rolled out and became part of the Unilever culture from 2010 onwards globally, that became clearer. But certainly the clarity around what it is. Am I here around a category piece? Am I here around Perfect Store? Is it around trade terms? Is it local sales opportunities? It was about basically helping give people simple frameworks and fairly simple structures to operate and think and understand where they were, would be my answer to that one. But it really was lack of clarity as to the reason I am here today.
Yeah, the other question I had is, obviously there's people and organizations that are able to see into the future a little further, or at least they do a better job of predicting the future. And so I'm curious, what sorts of new work are you seeing done in stores? What are the new in terms of things being done in store? What's kind of new right now that companies are thinking about and problems they're trying to solve and so forth that maybe no one else has seen yet?
I think there's definitely been a bit more. I guess the focus has predominantly been. I think there's two parts to it. So there's the technology side of it. So if you think back to that framework and the sort of model around the SFA tooling and the solution. So I think in that particular module, definitely some evolution around augmented reality. So people being able to actually show store teams what the execution of what their discussion will look like, and to potentially have a view of where it can go to be able to create scenarios. So I think there's certainly from a visual thing step up in AR, because the early versions of that were, I think, challenged by the sort of asset management of it, and it was a bit clunky and a bit slow. So that's one thing seeing. Obviously, there's also in the tooling space, if we just stay on the sort of tool side of it, I think image recognition has been around now for sort of 12 years. And that's come on where you're starting to see people being equipped with video solutions. So it's gone from just taking individual standalone images that are then stitched together and to produce, a perfect store report or a KPI report. So I think the days of being able to actually walk down an aisle with a tablet device and get instant results, that now exists, and it now exists, but it works. So again, all these things in the pioneers are great, but they go through the pain and the clunkiness, and that now is beginning to work. So I think from a tooling perspective, I would say it's those two. From a resourcing and people deployment type, the other side of it, I think you're starting to see a greater use of flexible resourcing. I'll be honest, I'm quite open and challenged there. I think I've seen it evolve beyond the Monday to Friday model. I think in the world we live in is clearly a 24/7 world. So I think starting to see one or two trials and where people have had deployed teams from Thursday to Monday rather than Monday to Friday. And also perhaps having more people in stores at key trading times over the weekend as well. So not just sort of Christmas or Easter surge type stuff, but I'm talking about permanently having a rebalancing of resources to key trading times, whether that's in the afternoons or evenings on perhaps on a Friday evening or on a Saturday or on a Sunday would be my answer to that one.
Our friend Mike Grain has been leading a really great series on shelf availability, talking to people with different perspectives, shelf scanning robots to algorithms and so forth. I'm just curious for your perspective. It seems like on-shelf availability is a problem that we've all been trying to solve for decades, and some would say we've not made progress as quickly as we should. And I just wonder, and I'm trying to bring out maybe the cynic in you. Is it because there's been so much focus on solutions and the whole gadgetry of it, and that we've not paid enough attention to process?
I would say that's a very fair hypothesis to test. I think if I go back to both my Gillette days and then to my early Unilever days, there were teams that were predominantly driven through more supply chain focused, who were working more collaboratively with the retailers around retail process, and were starting to make some, and I actually was part of the team myself back in 2010, 2011 at Unilever, where we were starting to make progress around process improvements of understanding and working collaboratively. Then I think, to your point, what you tended to see was perhaps some of these resources were redeployed, or perhaps in various re-engineering or restructuring programs, they were moved or disbanded. And I think then we got into very much a focus on the whole sort of SFA solutions, and technology itself would be the answer, and got away from some of the process stuff. And I think it's a balance. And I also think that there was more of a focus on we can do this ourselves. So it went from a collaborative retail working, I think, approach to more of a selfish is the wrong word, but a more centrally driven, we're going to do this ourselves. And everybody was trying to do it in, I guess, individually in isolation. And I don't think that's worked. So I think it will need to flip back round to a more collaborative and holistic view of working together. So yeah, I think I don't think you're far off. And I've followed Mike's series, and it's fascinating. And if people just think, it goes to my point about working in isolation, no one solution, I don't believe is the answer. So I don't believe you can do it just through POS data, with algorithms. I don't believe you can do it, whether it's through image recognition in a robot or whether it's on a fixed camera or whether it's a mobile solution. It's about bringing everything together, would be my answer to that one.
We'll give folks just a couple more questions to submit, or a couple more minutes rather, to submit any questions that they've got using the Q&A button. But I wonder if you might just spend a couple of minutes talking about kind of contextualizing all of this. You're a humble guy, so you're not gonna brag about all that you've done and all the big brands that you've worked with, but talk about, in general terms, obviously, talk about some of the work that you're doing with suppliers. And the reason for that is I just want people that are listening live now and listening later to know when it is that they should engage someone like you. So talk about the work that you're doing to kind of bring all of this together, the problems that you're working with brands to solve.
So I think it's quite simple. I believe I've had a slightly different approach. I think it's very much it's not around head office process, which is the classic sort of execution consulting type approach to this. I've started in store and worked back and then take the process in and come up with the hypothesis of what the problems actually are, rather than perhaps testing it centrally or asking for it in a head office and try to build solutions around that. So I actually spend a lot of time working in stores with people in different personas, in different roles, doing real jobs. So that's the first point. So I think is really understanding it basically at the sharp end. I think the second point to make is around having a simple framework, which is what I've shared, which is effectively a simplified version of something that was built and was successfully deployed in a former life, so that people can understand where they are and the facts that you're not going to necessarily fix everything at once, but you can hone in on where your biggest perhaps opportunity gaps or weaknesses are today. But ultimately, to win, you need to ultimately try and optimize all those 9 building blocks, and it then allows people to, I guess, have a perspective of where they are, to have a roadmap over 6-12 months of the things they need to do, whether you want to call it in waves or sprints or whatever. What is it I need to do? What are the biggest opportunities today? And it's sort of contextualized in a framework that can be revisited through defined principles, through definition of what best practice is, and I guess help people move forward. And that's effectively what I'm did in my former life for 7 years. And it's now what I'm offering as an independent in a slightly different approach to obviously the big guys who've all got models. Listen, there you can Google and get retail execution models off the internet. They exist, or you can pay hundreds of thousands or even millions to buy them if you so choose. But this is grounded in reality, and it's been proven to work.
Great stuff. Just as we wrap up, I would encourage anyone watching live and folks watching later, do a screen grab. Mike's got kind of a long phone number and email address, and I think you're going to want to grab that. I would encourage you to connect with Mike on LinkedIn, and I know he'd love to hear from you. Again, Mike Price, thank you so much for making time for us this morning. I appreciate how much you've shared. I mean, you've really given a lot of yourself away in what you've shared with us in the framework this morning. So we appreciate that so much, and look forward to hearing from you again, seeing you again soon.